All right, AP Psychology. We're going to continue with human development. We're talking about moral development. Your morals is the sense of right from what is wrong. It guides your behavior. Kohlberg studied this in the 1950s. He broke moral development into three major levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. So according to Kohlberg, pre-conventional. This is covering all the way up to the age of 9. These are moral. At this point, morals are primarily driven our understanding in terms of self-interest. So children essentially obey rules and for a reward or to avoid punishment. They want to be seen as good. I think that makes a lot of sense. Before this age, as we just talked about, it's very difficult for them cognitively to think about anyone other than themselves because of their egocentrism. It's hard for them to think about things that are not concrete. So it does make sense that they behave and think of morality in a sense of what result is going to happen if I do X behavior. So conventional stage is around the age of 12. Children understand the purpose and function of upholding laws to maintain social order. They begin to see good as what pleases or benefits. And again, that's where you're starting to see who you are, why things are the way they are. And then you have the post-conventional stage, which begins in adolescence, where you reflect on your personal beliefs. And then you start to think about, is this really what I think? Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this aligned with my parents? And even if it doesn't, and again, this is kind of where you see how you fit in the world, what you think. So for pre-conventional, it's basically, I don't want to get in trouble. I want the reward. Conventional is starting to see why we have rules in general, how things work. And then post-conventional is where you're really developing your own moral compass. Gilligan, who was Kohlberg's assistant, criticized this for being too rigid and way too logic. She argued that men were more masculine and believed in individualism, and women were more feminine and believed in morality in terms of responsibility. She creates this view and calls it ethics of care. So there you go. So the idea here is that Gilligan's looking at this more from a gender-based response and comes up with the idea of ethics of care, where you're looking at males being a little bit more individualistic and logical, and women being more responsible, caring for others, and cultivating personal relationships. And then we move on to one of our favorite people, Jonathan Haidt. He breaks down morality as far more nuanced. He believes that people's moral judgments guided far less by rationality, but more as just an instant, intuitive judgment. So he believed that preconceived notion of what is good or bad, intuitive based feeling is what guides you. Logic is simply used to rationalize the decision after it's already been done. So morality binds and blinds to our own set of biases. We are incapable or unwilling to legitimately consider another side. The analogy he uses is an elephant leans in and guides a rider who is essentially just the mouthpiece for the elephant. The elephant represents our intuition, and the rider represents our rational mind. The person is actually in control is the elephant, and the rider is simply there to justify the actions. So we are walking and talking confirmation bias machines, largely guided by our intuition. We went through this in class. A lot of you had strong feelings towards this about the link between using confirmation bias as just a form of your own morality and judgment. It was a little bit insulting to you. So I appreciate how much controversy was noted through this. But the idea is that the American participants, um, we make split-second judgments on topics without considering all the sides. We simply dig in and try to justify what we already know. And then we went over together this example about the family whose dog passes away from natural causes, and then they eat the dog, and your knee gut reaction was, you shouldn't, horrible. And then when we really thought about it, many of us were like, well, the dog is no longer with us. What purpose is he serving, or how bad is it to him, etc. Jack might be waking up from his nap, So I might have to pause this for a second, but the next slide is parenting, which apparently I have to go do. I'm going to pause and then you'll hear my voice again on the same video unless I mess it up. All right, so Jack has drank his milk, he's watching Llama Llama, so you might hear that in the background. So parenting. So biology is the ultimate determining factor for one's behavior and development. However, environmental factors such as parenting can have or do have an impact, right? So one of the foremost researchers on this is Dana Baumrind. Good thing you don't have to pronounce it on the exam, who analyzed and counseled different families over the years, and she determined, roughly speaking, that there are 3 different parenting styles. 1, authoritarian. This is the style of parenting that imposes rules and expects unquestioned obedience. While children are exposed to this style are greatly obedient, it never negatively impacts them in a long term as they tend to have a lower self-esteem, are less independent, and develop less social skills. Then there's like the opposite of this, which is permissive, which is that parent submitting to the child's every desire. Is that parent that wants to be a cool mom, not like those other moms, cool mom, right? They make a few demands, they use little punishment, they do a poor job of socializing their children, which leaves them impulsive and often anti-authority. Children of permissive parents tend to be more aggressive, immature, have higher rates of school dropout and delinquency. So the type of parenting that is suggested is kind of a mixture of these two, which is authoritative, right? Not to be confused with authoritarian, it's authoritative. So the parent is both demanding but also responsive to the child. They have rules and enforce them, but they explain the rule, why it is in effect, and they encourage a discussion about that rule. Children of those parents often have high self-esteem, self-reliance, and self-confidence. So, culture is also impacted on parenting. Harry Harlow shows the necessity of a caregiver to give affection for healthy development, noting that even in monkeys, physical touch and social exposure. So the takeaway for parenting is authoritarian is listen to what I say. If you say, why? Because I said so, right? Permissive is, I'm a cool mom. And then authoritative is, all right, here are the rules. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're doing it. If you don't understand why, please ask, right? And if you have trouble thinking about different parents because you have your own parents, right, or folks that are parents to you, think of teachers that fit into these different categories and which ones may have been the most effective for you. Okay, now we're going to move on to adolescence. All right, adolescence, the best time of your life. Said no one ever. It's the transition period between childhood and adulthood. Extending from puberty to independence. There's physical, behavioral, and cognitive changes. So this is where you're supposed to get better self-control, improve judgment, better focus, better ability to think from different perspectives. You're supposed to be able to analyze hypotheticals, think abstractly, plan long-term, weigh legal moral issues, and a host of other cognitive abilities. So these are all true. Your brain has developed, you do have these abilities to do this. However, there is a social component to adolescence where you want to fit in, that your friends' opinions mean more than your parents' opinions. So unfortunately, because of those social aspects, I feel like you become unable to do all the things that maybe you can do cognitively because of that. My son's throwing things at me. Okay, adolescence begins physically during puberty with a surge of hormones. It results in growth spurts, arm hair, it's gross. Men, you're going to benefit socially usually because you become more athletic and stronger, and the bigger kid's usually the more popular one. Unfortunately, there's also a risk of alcohol abuse, delinquency, and premature sexual activity if you look older than your age. And then for females, it's rough. You got the hormone-fed feelings, you got serious moods, there's emotional issues, you feel out of place, you're ostracized. Girls that develop earlier physically, there's harassment, and it's just, I hated it. It's the worst time ever. But the idea is that cognitively, You should have grown physically, you're growing, and it's just a different stage in everyone's life. So now we're going to continue. You're moving away from your parents' approval. You don't care about them. You care more about what your peers think. This is what our buddy Eric Erickson came up with as he studied adolescents' behavior. Culture can also be influential. We're encouraged to find our identities, whereas oh no, I'm gonna have to stop, guys. Sorry. So we find our identities. You tend to disagree more. This is usually a difficult time for you and your parents. Your parents need to accept that you're growing older and making changes and want to be with your friends. Sometimes parents aren't able to do that. So adolescence does have a impact on your family relationships as well. Sorry, I want to rush through this because crazy time. Uh, this is one of my favorites. This is kind of new. This is emerging adulthood. So in the 1990s, psychologists noted a new phenomenon. There are less jobs available, there's less training, and we create this new thing, emergent adults. So they're semi-dependent adults who make their own decisions about their lives, their studies, their careers, but they remain at least partially financially dependent on their parents. This is due to things are very expensive. It's difficult to get an entry level wage. Those jobs are poor paying. There's a lot of schooling that has to go through. We've been in economic crises where were no jobs, right? So this idea that we were supposed to go through, baby, toddler, child, adult, teen, and I'm sorry, baby, toddler, adolescence, teen, adult, there's this whole little gap between teenager and adult because of socioeconomic issues, and it's impacting how those folks mature. People begin to develop their own identity and a sense of self. Your prefrontal cortex is pretty much developed, but you're in this kind of like weird zone between being a kid and being adult. And the more and more comfortable that you become, the ages often peak of. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize. Jack seems okay now. So also what happens here is during the emerging adult phase, this is the most stressed you will ever be in your entire life. And, I can see that there are different things that happen in life that evoke stress, but I remember, and I'm very fortunate, and I remember being extremely stressed out. 22 years old, working as a high school teacher, making less than 50 grand. I was taking home, like, I remember they were threatening to lay off teachers, and I would have made the same amount on unemployment that I was actually working. And you're trying to figure things out on your own. I lived on my own. It's stressful. So again, this emerging adult, it's like right where you're graduating college, but you're not necessarily on your own. You might still be living with your parents, or your parents need to financially help you. It's a rough time, to be quite honest. Okay, something to look forward to. All right, so lifespan development. So Erickson comes up with a predetermined order of these 8 stages, which we did do a project on, so hopefully you remember them. Um, According to the theory, successful completion of each age results in a healthy personality. Failure to complete the stage results in a reduced ability to complete further stages, and you are unhealthy. So think of it like Maslow's hierarchy of need, but lifespan development. This is quite famous. I could see this on the, being brought up on the exam. This is the chart. I will add a video on this because I'm not giving it enough time, but we did do a project, so I hope this is triggering a memory. All right, guys. Sorry for the interruptions and some of the craziness here in the Perez household. I hope that was helpful. I hope you are all doing well. That wraps up human development.